Alright, folks. Hello and welcome to another how-to tutorial video with the 1987 cars, the 1987 Cup Series cars. This weekend we're going to be at Talladega. So there isn't a lot to talk about in terms of what you can do in a solo testing session. The race is going to be in a pack, and the aerodynamics of the way that the cars react in the pack are going to change a lot. So practicing a long run solo is not going to be as valuable as it was last week at Dover. Also, something that I want to call attention to is, let me see, both those cover it. Let me kill my face cam for a second. The race is 50 laps in length, and Caps is showing it at full throttle that you can only run 34.7 laps. You can probably stretch that to about 40 laps in the draft, but you're not going to be making this race without stop if it goes green the whole way like you could at Dover last week. So you're going to have to pit. But if there's a caution where you're going to restart with at about lap 10 with about 40 laps to go, you should probably consider pitting to top up the tank, and it's up to you whether you want to take tires at that point. Probably a good idea to go ahead and use one of your two sets to change rights, because later on in the race you're going to be wanting to stay out for track position if there's a late caution, most likely. So it's probably best to go ahead and use them early. I'll leave that as a judgment call to you, because a lot of that is based on how you feel the flow of the race is going in your particular session as to what the right call with pit stops are going to be, or what the right call is most likely to be. If you feel like there's a decent chance that it can go green from lap 10 onward though, and you have a caution that's around lap 7 to lap 8, it might be a good idea to pit, because if you can make it all the way on fuel and other drivers do end up having to pit late, you can get a really good finish out of a race by pitting, by virtue of having pitted early and then saving those 5-ish laps of fuel that you need in the draft. You have to run a little bit differently, and you have to make sure that you stay in the draft and you're not leading the pack, but you can save a lot of fuel here in the draft if you're using it effectively to manage your throttle. So know that going in, that that is a strategy play that you can use for this week. As far as what you can learn in solo practice, qualifying can be really important. Getting a good qualifying spot and starting up front in these races. If there's an early wreck, which especially if you're in the lower splits and you feel like it's more likely that you're going to have an early wreck, being out in front of that is just an easy way of avoiding a wreck and missing it. So qualifying well is going to be good. You're going to want to probably go in and just get a feel for how the car works and what settings work for you. For me, I've found that putting my steering offset to -2 this week centers up the wheel nicely on the straights. When it was at 0, I had to have the wheel cocked just a little bit to the right, so putting it at -2. And I've also found that for my personal preference, 14:1 steering ratio seems to be giving me the right balance of responsiveness with the wheel and openness in terms of glide that I want. Now I'm going to go ahead and run a lap here and show you what I'm doing live for qualifying. If this doesn't end up beating my best lap in the session, I might go ahead and pull that up. But basically you want to, what I'm doing is I'm charging pretty good out of pit road, but I haven't been able to get this runoff pit road done properly such that I'm carrying as much speed off of turn 4 on my out lap as I am at the end of lap 1. If you can figure out a way to carry about 201 to 202 coming out of turn 4 here on your first lap, which again I haven't been able to do. I'm trying a little bit of a lower line. Running up by the wall didn't do it for me. But what you're looking at, from what I've seen, is you want to hit the start-finish line at about 207 is pretty good to start the lap. You see right there I was at more like 205, 206. And so you can see how I'm already tracking at plus 0.05 through the center of this corner. This has actually been a pretty good lap 1 right here, but I'm tracking at a half a tenth off of my best time. So I know that this lap's no good. So I'm going to enter a little bit higher here and try to get a little bit of a downhill run coming out of the corner and straighten up as best I can. You can see right there, exit speed 201, 202. A little bit higher than optimal through the tri-oval. Just want to make it as straight as possible, but not riding all the way up by the wall. And you can see that I was 207 at the line right there. Drop right down. You want to get right on the bottom of this line. Don't cross it though. Very important that you don't cross it. Crossing that line and touching the apron even a little bit with the left side tires will really upset your car. That can cost you a half a tenth. At the top end, qualifying times here can be so tight that that can drop you back significantly. Just having a little bobble that costs you a half a tenth in qualifying can hurt you a lot more here than it would at other places. You can see I'm actually 0.03 right now off of my top time. I'm going to actually go through a little bit better through the tri-oval there. 6:01, not bad. My fastest has been a 5:78, but that gives you a decent idea. I'm not the best qualifying here. Some of the guys who are really fast tend to out-qualify me by a good bit. I was in the 6s earlier. I've gotten it down to the 5s. I don't actually know what's going to be quick tomorrow, but that lap right there should, those general pointers and some of the things that I was talking about as I was doing my lap should help you. I'm not touching brake bias this week, and a big reason for that is that you're not actually using the brakes at any point when you're navigating the track, even if you're in traffic. I highly recommend using strategic lifts and using that as an opportunity to bank a little bit of fuel saving. If you can come down and if you're in a splash and go situation and you can take less fuel and spend less time in pit road, you can leapfrog some guys if you're in a situation where that matters. So anytime where you're saving fuel, that's beneficial. The other reason, the only time when you're going to actually be on the brakes is when you're avoiding a wreck and when you're on pit road. And in that case, you don't want a bunch of rear brake dialed into your car, because you actually, when you get on the brakes, you're going to want to be able to get on them fairly heavily and have the car stop in a straight line. If you stop on the brakes and it spins you out, then you're likely to get involved in a wreck. Either, avoiding a wreck, you might just end up in it because you spun out, or when you're braking very hard to come onto pit road, if you have to make a green flag pit stop again, you're going to want to make sure that you have good straight line braking and that you're not putting yourself in a risk where the rear tires will lock before the fronts and send you into a spin on that. So for that reason, this week, I'm just not messing with the brake bias. I'm leaving it default. If you feel like it's more optimal to shift it slightly closer to 50%, you might do that, but I'm just leaving that alone at default. I haven't done a lot of testing with threshold braking to see if there's some slight advantage to be gained getting onto pit road. I feel like just leaving it the default is probably good for that. The other thing that I recommend doing is go back and watch some of my old race videos, or if you have someone else that runs these cars, go back and watch some of their onboard race videos and identify positions in the race where there was a mistake made, where they slipped, that cost them substantial track position going back. Also identify moves in the race where they were able to make a move that moved them forward. Track position at Talladega in these cars can actually be fairly difficult to gain, and it can be really easy to lose. So, making sure when you're going through the corners that you keep the front end pointed down, you keep a little bit of skew, but not too much. You don't want that back end coming around on you. but you also don't want the car plowing on exit. It's really easy, especially when the tires start wearing out around lap 10. If you've abused your right front and put too much heat into it, it really can push pretty hard towards the wall. So you're going to want to be mindful of that and make sure that you're not just absolutely plowing tight coming off of the corners. The other thing is that these cars can get really loose and tail happy on entry if you're putting too much wheel into it combined with too much throttle, especially if you've got a guy behind you that's taking air off of your spoiler. So be mindful of all things. Be ready to have a little bit of lift. Keep the wheel very light in your hands and be ready to make some minor adjustments. Again, that's why I'm probably going to be going with a 14-to-1 steering ratio rather than a 16-to-1 this week, is I do want a little bit more responsiveness in the wheel so that I can make those micro adjustments if I get into trouble. All of that with the idea of it being really important to try to carry maximum momentum, not necessarily maximum throttle pressure, but carry maximum momentum, carry as straight and as gradual a line through these corners as you can. If you notice with my qualifying lap, but go back and highlight this in the onboard, and I'm actually going to pull up what the best lap is. You can see how the attitude of the car is pointing right down to the bottom, and again, right next to the line. I'm going to show you what this looks like in TV1. You want to be right next to that line. So right there. That's where, right there, I'm right on the line. And then this is what it looks like in the cockpit. So you can actually do this. You can go run some laps and you can get right down to the point where you're on the line. Find out where the line is in your cockpit view and know that that's the target that you're aiming for. You know, in this case, you know, it's in towards close to the top of it, but not quite at the top of the center of the steering wheel. You can look at that. But I tend to be, you know, keep that in your peripheral vision as a guideline. But I'm really looking still at this track out far ahead towards exit because you want to be making really smooth, straight off exits. That's where you can gain a lot of momentum and set up passes going down the straightaways. So what works in qualifying here to be fast can be applied to the race in terms of understanding the attitude of the car that you're aiming for during the race. Unfortunately, you can't solo test the way that the car is going to feel in the draft. You're just going to need to hop into some practice sessions, try to get a feel for it, hop into some race sessions, and get used to and get comfortable with running in the pack and putting yourself in some difficult situations. One other thing I want to highlight here is that the car can get very, very light as you go through the tri-oval. Let me just show you what this looks like. So I'm going down through the tri-oval, and you can see I hit a little bit of a bump right here, got wobbly, and then put too much steering input into it, and the back end just came around. That's not difficult to do, and when you're racing in dirty air, this can be all the more common. So you want to be really steady with your wheel. What happens here is as I go into slow motion, is I'm going down and I'm pointing down at the inside. I hit a little bump right here that causes a correction that causes the car to wash out. Then I put too much wheel into it back to the inside trying to get down low. It's actually a little bit flatter down here than it is about a groove up. It feels like there's some progressive banking going on, and it upsets the car. The car starts kind of high siding, and it just comes right around on you. You will see some guys either solo spin themselves or get into a situation where they have to lift and get turned going through the tri-oval. That is very common. That happens a lot. The tri-oval at Talladega in these cars is really treacherous. There will be a lot of wrecks that happen over there, and that's why the cars get very light and very unsettled going through there. So just be aware of it and try to hold a really steady wheel as much as possible. Again, this is one of those ones where it's because it's pack racing, it's difficult to practice what's actually going to be applicable in the race. You're going to want to watch some video of past races and see how those races tend to flow, and look at what's happening in certain situations in different proximities to other cars, and kind of anticipate and plan for some different scenarios, because you're going to need to make your movements well in advance of some situations. Things happen real quick at these tracks. Try to do your best. It's not completely in your control when you're racing at Talladega and Daytona, but the one thing that I have noticed at running a lot of these races is the guys that are able to work their way up through the pack, get to the front, and stay up front tend to be the ones that are fighting for the win at the end. Now, they also, working your way to the front in these ones can cause you to put yourself in a lot of risky situations, and you may end up wrecking out of some races doing that too. That's just the nature of the beast at Talladega and Daytona. So do your best, have a game plan going into the race, and then stick with it. Probably have a couple different scenarios in mind, but use those. If you're really unfamiliar with it and you find yourself being uncomfortable, try using that race practice as just log laps. Try to get as deep into the race as possible, and try to keep yourself out of trouble. And that's going to be what ultimately yields to your greatest likelihood of having some success here at Talladega. These tracks, Talladega and Daytona, are not my strongest in these cars by any means. So, do your best with them. And if you can find some advice from some other folks who are better at them than I am, by all means, go ahead and take that. Good luck out there this week. Hope that this video has some tips that will help you out. I'll be out there tomorrow night, Monday night, for the strength field race, and I might be in for a couple other ones throughout the week. So hope to see you out there. If you like this video and have some thoughts on it, please don't hesitate to leave a comment down below. Click that like button, hit subscribe, head over to twitch.tv/JohnTheodoreLive. Click the heart to give me a follow, enable notifications on both platforms so that you can get notifications for new videos or when I go live. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good one. Good luck out there this week, guys.